Fernando Ortega is a celebrated singer-songwriter, pianist, and award-winning recording artist. He joins us today to talk about his inspiring journey and some new adventures. Welcome to 100 Huntley Street, Fernando.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Well, we're so thankful you're here. And welcome back, actually, because you've been here before.
I have, yes. Thanks.
Well, Fernando, I wanted to chat with you a bit about your musical journey. And, you know, that began at such a young age. You grew up in New Mexico. You were one of 8 generations throughout your family line, the 8th generation. And there's so much rich legacy and heritage connected to your background there in New Mexico. And I've read places that you've written this has really influenced your music.
It has. I think, especially the landscape seems to constantly, the New Mexico landscape, which is high desert, mountainous, but then there's also a lot of like desert grassland. And those references have made it into a lot of songs over the years. And I moved to California when I was 26. And I tell my daughter now that I lived out there for 22 years. And even like during that first year out there, I was always in my heart, like moving back to New Mexico, which is where I'm back there now. And it'll be home, till I die.
Well, it's, a really beautiful place, that region, and I haven't been there to visit yet, but I would like to.
Yeah.
Fernando, with 22 records, albums that you've done, and so many of them in the genre of Christian worship music, what was the pull you felt towards that genre?
It's, it's not a great story just because it's something I resisted. Well, no, maybe it is.
Maybe that is a good story.
Maybe that is a good story. I wanted to be a classical pianist.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was so hotly fixed on that, and I practiced like crazy. And I went to audition at some of the bigger music schools, Juilliard in Manhattan and Mannes and Curtis, when I was 21. And I just bombed all those auditions, And it was because my friend let me into the practice rooms at Juilliard. She was a violinist there, and I was practicing this Chopin ballade that was a very difficult piece. And all of a sudden, I heard somebody playing it down the hall, in the practice rooms, and playing it so much better than I could. And so I was really intimidated, but I went out and I looked in the window, and there was a 12-year-old girl playing it, and she was phenomenal. And that was sort of like a big negative hammer on my head, like realizing that really my gift was not that. And then the Lord and I was very depressed for a couple of years after that. But that's when the Lord started showing me that I had, a gift for singing and for writing songs and writing specifically Christian songs. And so it was a negative the way it got there, but it has ended up being exactly where I'm supposed to be.
Well, it's incredible because for so many of us who listen to your music, it's hard to believe that you struggled to succeed in those auditions. And so in a way, I'm looking at it as divine providence, that God had other plans for you and to use your gifts to glorify Him.
Yeah, that's how I see it now. I didn't see it that way back then. It was very difficult couple of years, but man, it was a good one.
Your journey with God, throughout your childhood, you went to a Presbyterian church and you heard hymns, but your journey with God, when would you say it became quite strong and personal for you in a way where it began to shape the course of your musical career and your life?
Yeah, I was born in the Presbyterian church, and my grandfather, who was born in 1889, converted to the Presbyterian church, he and his wife, in the 20s. So Presbyterianism was really central for my family and my ancestors. But I left the church when I was 12, and then I came back to faith in a Pentecostal church that was really wild. I mean, the wildest Pentecostal stuff you see on TV was tame compared to our church. And that's where I learned. I just would sit at the piano and I learned how to improvise there. The bass player would just call out chord names, G, D, C, and I'd be playing along. And so that music was like what really grabbed me, Pentecostal music. And then over the years, I kind of started longing to hear those hymns that I sang when I was a kid, but I didn't care about their meaning.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I was finding meaning in those old hymns. And so it's kind of those different elements that shaped what I do now.
It's so neat to hear, that convergence in your life and how God moves. It's so interesting. When you're looking back on Wow, all the songs that you've either written or composed, or even the hymns you've reworked for the songs you've recorded. Are there any, or is there one that particularly stands out for you when you reflect on your faith journey with God?
I don't know if there's just one, but the first one that comes to mind is a song called "Jesus, King of Angels," because there were a lot of years, I would say 15, where I struggled with anxiety and severe panic attacks, and I would be lying in bed 2 a.m. with my eyes wide open, just kind of imagining horrible things happening, things that would probably never happen in my life, and get so caught up in those just anxiety and fear. I lived in fear, and so much of those days was me on my knees asking God to please get me through the next hour. And I kind of crawled through life that way, but it made me really deeply rely on God.
I relate in different ways, and it's interesting how God sometimes just heals us slowly over time.
Yeah.
It just takes time. It's, you keep praying, you keep asking, and I like that prayer, God, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sometimes he doesn't remove it right away, and some of these beautiful songs have been written out of that pain and to maybe minister to others going through similar circumstances.
Yeah.
Fernando, when you think about God as creator, and he's, the creator of the universe, and here you are as a creative, working on songs and creating music, does that really strike a deep chord in you?
As God as a creator?
Yeah.
Very much. Thinking about what it's like now to create a stanza of a song, and how pleasing it is when it comes. You're a writer, you know.
Yeah.
But how much, when we really get to understand where it comes from, or how our creativity is just like God pouring himself through us. That'll be an amazing moment to see when we...
Yeah, to fully understand in heaven, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Throughout the pandemic, so many of us were having to find new hobbies. We were doing different things. And of course, someone like you're used to touring and recording. But God birthed something else in your life during the pandemic, and it was this book, Fernandos Birds. And speaking of creativity and God's creation, these images which you took are completely stunning.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yes. Look, I mean, and you took them, many of them in the New Mexico region, but also globally as you were traveling.
Yes. The majority of them are from New Mexico and Arizona, but and also Florida. There are great birds in Florida. But if I'm in a place for any extended time, I always bring my camera gear with me and go traipsing through the woods looking for birds and stuff. Yeah. I remember meeting years ago, maybe 25 years ago, I met John Stott, the great.
Really?
Yeah, and I was providing music for one of his fundraising events. Yeah. So he was backstage, and he was just talking about birds, And I remember looking at my manager and going, "Nerd alert!" And then, and then now here I am, and I would give anything to go back and show him my photos and tell him the birds I've seen, and
that's like a little seed God was sowing in your life.
Yeah. He was such a great,
an incredible theologian.
Incredible theologian, but boy did he love birds.
What I loved as well, Fernando, in this book are a lot of the stories about each bird. I just love it. There's so much character. And every time I was starting a paragraph, I just get drawn in, about this bird and what their life is like and what's happening. It's really neat storytelling. It's unique.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
I come from my whole family, they're great storytellers. I think my brother's the best among us, but my grandfather that I mentioned, he was really a master storyteller, and he never spoke English, so all these stories in Spanish about just our family and ancestors in New Mexico, and ghost stories and stuff. It was just very good stuff to hear when we were kids.
Yeah. So. Fernando, we just love you here in Canada, and we're always trying to get you back. And I know sometimes your daughter Ruby goes out on the road with you. Mm-hmm. She's 14, right?
14, yeah, almost 15.
So that's a whole phase of life right now for you, raising a teenage daughter, and you have a very special connection to her, though.
We're very close.
Yeah.
Yeah, and partially because she's my daughter, but She's great. She's just hilarious and beautiful and kind and sweet, and but she's a musician, and so she plays. We bought her. My brother and I bought her a pink Stratocaster.
Oh wow!
So she carts that thing around and plays, all kinds of rock music. She hauled me to a Smashing Pumpkins concert the other night, and we had a blast. But and what I love is that she's very. She grew up listening to a lot of Beatles, Joni Mitchell, James Taylor, and so she knows those records really well.
Yeah.
She can hear a song and she'll go, "Oh, that's from Revolver, second cut, first side, or whatever." But then a lot of modern bands, so I get to keep abreast of younger bands that are current, And,
that is so neat.
yeah, it's fun.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Nothing like being a parent of a teenager. I'm a parent of one right now, so it's a super exciting time. But it's always making me think future focus. Like I think a lot about legacy. We talked off the top of this interview about legacy and heritage and what we receive.
Yeah.
When you think about, you've had such an interesting life's journey in music and in art and writing. When you think about legacy and you think about, well, this is what I hope those who are following along with me in my life will take from what they see in my life. Mm-hmm. What do you think about? What do you hope people see when they look at you?
Well, maybe just, clinging to God in adversity, I guess. And I feel like that's the main thrust of most of my songs. It's a theme that I'm always revisiting my songs. Alistair Begg, the speaker.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he was telling me, you need to write some happier songs, lad, because they are just about, a lot of them about struggle, but also I guess this story about my anxiety, that it's a thing in my past now. I love that, and I hope that going forward with this new record that I'm coming out with, that it'll talk about that people will see that the hope in the new songs and everything.
Well, and that's what I'm excited about, your new record coming out. Yeah. Now, do you have your title yet? I know you've got songs.
No, I don't have a title.
I'm just like, when we get the first...
So it's a weird record how it's coming together. Normally I have a theme that I work on. And so there was the song that was the impetus behind the record is a song I wrote for my daughter when she was younger, maybe 4, 5, or 6. It's called Every Time You Leave. And so, but then as I started putting together other songs, it really, that wasn't the central theme. It wasn't Ruby, but so right now the record's almost completed, and I would say that even though that was the original theme, Ruby, my daughter, it's morphed into more of a record about God's faithfulness, and then there are some songs, just life songs about, like I said about Ruby, there's one about finding God in small things, like we were talking about bird songs and everything. Yes, but I don't have a title yet. It's a work in progress. It's almost done, though. I better find a title pretty quickly and some artwork.
Well, I cannot wait to listen to that album. And I'm so excited about some of the songs you're going to be sharing with us today.
Yeah, me too.
Later in the program.
Yeah.
Fernando, your life has been full of so much artistry and authenticity and humility. It's so many different pieces. But I'm just so thankful that you are with us today to share your story and to share about Fernandos Birds, your upcoming album. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's always a pleasure.